for joining us today. Ruud de Bruijne, you're a program manager, energy system and offshore wind at the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. Now, the Netherlands are quite impressive. They are commissioning between 1.5 and 2 gigawatts of offshore wind energy every 2 or 3 years, and it's going to get even better. They want to double that capacity in the future. What's your country's secret?
Well,
You need to be closer.
First of all, it's not a kind of a magic that we're doing.
You need to be closer with it.
It's not a kind of magic that we're doing. We started about 8 years ago, and then we had a very intensive debate with the industry, looking to all the different risks in the development of offshore wind farms, and trying to find out which party could manage those risks the best. And by that we found out, well, it's the government who can manage the consenting risk the best. So we do all the consenting. And we prepare the sites for the offshore wind farms before the tenders are going to the market. So it's our organization who is doing all the preliminary site investigations before the tender starts. And we thought it was the infrastructure should be in the hands of the TSO, our transmission system operator TenneT. So TenneT is made responsible for building a grid at sea. So when we send out a tender, the consenting is already done. So the developers know exactly what the permit conditions are going to be. They know when TenneT has their platforms operational. They know the commissioning date. And they know exactly the site conditions. So they can, once you win a tender, you can almost immediately start building the wind farm.
It's a calculated risk.
So it looks like we're doing kind of magic, but in reality, before the tender is going out, there's already done a lot of work. So working on speeding up the development is already going on for a couple of years with teams within the ministry, within our company.
And how's that different, do you think, from other countries?
Well, situation in each country is different. You have countries where they start with leasing, a tender for leasing a site where nothing is known about. That's typically what you see in a country like the UK. Then you have a lease, but you don't know if consenting will be successful, and you don't know anything about the site conditions. So there are still a lot of risk in there. So that's the reason why you see a lot of projects going down the drain in that system. So far, we haven't seen that in the Netherlands. Every time that we concluded the tender, the wind farm was built a couple of years after. So
you just say it, you do it.
Yes.
Here in France, one very crucial point is opposition to wind farms.
Yes.
And that really drags out the permitting process. Is that not a problem at all in the Netherlands?
Well, we do have fishermen, and they don't like wind farms. So there's opposition from that side. But as a matter of fact, all the other users of the North Sea, and the Netherlands is bordering one of the most busiest parts of the North Sea. We have very good cooperation with all the other users. Ministry of Defense, shipping, oil and gas, etc. So, so far, no, there's not so much opposition against it, which doesn't mean that there are no constraints.
What are these constraints?
And one of the most important constraints is called ecology. That's, you know, also wind farms do have an effect on
the ecosystem.
And what you see now is that it's not only the energy transition which is being prioritized, it's also biodiversity, which is very high on the agenda, and that is conflicting so now and then.
Yesterday we heard about from Patrick Brown, who has done a thesis on biodiversity and net zero impact, net zero gain.
Yes.
By developers. Is that something that you're discussing in the Netherlands?
Oh yes.
Different approaches?
As a matter of fact, the first tenders that we did, we still had to subsidize the wind farm. So it was quite easy to select a winner. The lowest bid was the winner. So that was then we saw that the price reduction was going down so fast that we could do it without subsidy. So the first wind farm, worldwide wind farm, we built without subsidy is built by Vattenfall and is going to be in operation this year, 1.5 gigawatt. No Eurocent of subsidy going in there. And after that we saw, well there is still room in the business case. And then you can do two things. You can make it a kind of an auction, see what people are willing to pay for it. But we thought it was a better idea to prepare for the future. Now, if you look to the long term, the integration of offshore wind is affected not only by ecology, but also in your whole energy system. In the Netherlands, we have by 2030 around 10, 11 gigawatt offshore wind up and running. At land, we have already 6 gigawatts wind. We have already 20 gigawatts of rooftops solar PV. Now, to put those figures a little bit into perspective, during the night, we have a load of around 8-9 gigawatt. The peak load during the weekdays is somewhere between 18 and 20 gigawatts. So that means after everything what we are going to do after, beyond 2030, is related to the energy transition as a whole. So it must go hand in hand with electrification in the industry, the introduction of hydrogen to phase out fossil fuels, etc. So those two things, ecology and system integration, are really key. And that's the reason why in the recent tenders we introduced so-called non-price criteria. So if you make a proposal, we have now a tender in preparation of 4 gigawatts. For 2 gigawatt, the winner will be selected on the measures for ecology, and the other 2 gigawatt will be selected on how the system integration is done.
You said electrification was an important topic. We heard yesterday from the ambassador of Norway, Mr. Engelsen. He said that obviously they already have a lot of renewable energy and they will construct more offshore wind energy because they will introduce lots of electric cars. I suppose that's also one of the factors why you're really pushing ahead, right? Although you already have that much renewable energy.
Well, we have to realize that in Northwest Europe, wind energy and solar energy will be the key engines of the electricity system. And that means that we introduce energy sources in our system which are fluctuating by the wind and by the sun. And that means that we need a lot of flexibility in the system. So it's very good that a number of countries or all countries are working on those ideas. And one of the next steps is to connect them with each other. Interconnections are going to help flexibility of the system, as well as storage will, as batteries will do. But a strong infrastructure, more interconnections, both with electricity and hydrogen, is going to help us.
That's obviously also a topic that will be discussed later on here on
Yeah.
stage, interconnection between grid systems. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ruud de Bruijne, that was
Okay.
fascinating. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.